We don't need rehearsals. They're rehearsing on their own.
No, they're not.
No. They are not rehearsing on their own. And you know what? If they tell you that they are, they're actors, they're liars, and they're good at it. Chuck, what's the most valuable pre-production prep that you can do to ensure a good film?
Rehearsals.
Thank you for that. Welcome to Indie Film Podcast. I'm Victoria.
And I'm Chuck. Today we are on episode 2 of our 7 Deadly Sins of Indie Filmmaking series. Last week we talked about bad scripts. Today we're going to talk about a great way to ruin a good one, which is skipping rehearsals.
Truly the fastest and easiest way to sink your film.
Or your friendships.
Or honestly, your reputation.
Or all three if you want to try real hard.
Skipping rehearsals can lead to things like a very rushed production, falling behind on set, missing your shots, or performances that sort of feel like everyone just met 5 minutes ago.
And that's because everybody just met 5 minutes ago. So let's talk about the 6 things that we include in our rehearsal list. Victoria, do you want to start off?
Yeah. I
Sweet.
think the first thing is probably something everybody considers a part of rehearsals, which is running lines.
Also, character work with your actors.
Blocking and choreography.
Difficult camera movements.
Special effects testing, which I will also include makeup testing in that.
Good one. And then just new areas in general. For example, if you're a director that's never shot 10 actors in one scene before, maybe you should rehearse that a little bit so you're not wasting everybody's time on set.
Probably a good call.
Yeah,
do you want to talk to know if everyone can hear you on set?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt there. Do you want to talk a little bit about situations where you've been on set where it was clear that actors didn't run lines, didn't do their character work, and maybe even the extreme case of an actor coming on set that is not off book?
Yep. I think we've probably all have at least one horror story where somebody showed up without being off book. And I understand there are some moments where, especially for, longer monologues and things or really fast bantery type situations where you haven't had a chance to rehearse with the other person yet, it feeling a little clunky or a little rough, or maybe a few lines get put in the wrong order. But generally speaking, you can tell when somebody didn't bother to look at the script until that morning and they're on their way to set.
Yeah, it was really interesting to me when I transitioned from doing a lot of independent film work where it was just friends of mine, which still do that, right?
Yeah.
And these are unpaid sets. And then going on to do sound on like some paid commercial sets. And just because you're paying someone, it doesn't mean that they're going to show up off book.
No.
And when I was working on just friendly sets and things were last minute, it would be expected sometimes where it's like, sorry, we didn't have a chance to look at the script. Casting our friends who are also actors, they have to look at their lines really quickly before they get on. Hopefully it's not too difficult.
Yeah.
But when I went on the first commercial set where somebody was getting paid and I saw that happen, and it was nice because like the onus wasn't on me. It wasn't
my fault.
Yeah, it wasn't my production. But then it made me realize that, when it gets to the point where I am producing something where I'm in charge of the budget, that's not going to be a given for me is, well, I'm paying this actor. Of course, they're going to show up off book because they might not.
They definitely might not. And there's no faster way to grind your entire set to a halt than you roll action and
line.
Yep. That's not.
We can cut this together, right?
Yeah, we could just do it. You could
You're
just feed me the lines, right? Maybe some cue cards. Do you have a teleprompter? Something like that.
Yeah, you're not Marlon Brando. Everybody out there, you should probably get off book. Like that's key. And yes, it's one of those things that we've done, and we're going to get into that a little bit later about respecting everybody's time because we had an episode where we talked about budgeting.
Yeah, and
it is nice when people are generous with their time, but also, you only got one shot to get one opportunity. You only got one shot to get what you need, but there's only one opportunity when you have everybody on set to get all the footage that you need, and you don't want that to be difficult.
No,
in the moment, you're already going to have stuff popping up that's going to be hard to handle.
Yeah, there are so many unpredictable things that can happen on set. If you make sure you have rehearsals, then you know at least these actors have some familiarity with these lines.
For sure. Do you want to talk about blocking and movements at all and stuff that you've done in that realm for film?
Yeah. So blocking and choreography and general movements, I feel like that covers a lot. But especially if you have things where you have literal dance choreography, for example,
Yeah.
You want to rehearse that.
Yeah.
And then if you have, any sort of fight or stunt sequences,
For
those
sure.
are just a safety precaution to make
Yes.
sure that you try to rehearse those a few
Yeah.
times. And then general movements. So that way, if you're having these rehearsals and you can have the characters sort of walk through, ideally in the space and the location, right? That would be really cool, but budget doesn't always allow that. So
Yeah.
you may not have access to the exact location, but even if you've got just a garage somewhere and you can kind of clear out some space and use a little bit of painter's tape, or I guess you could use gaff tape, but it's so expensive. I don't know if I would.
Yeah.
Masking tape or something like that to sort of mark off like, well, here's where the stove is and the kitchen.
Or just go out in a yard or a park and use some sticks.
Yeah, you've
and a
got
leaf.
options here. You can get real flexible with some of this stuff, but being able to run through some of those movements, especially if your camera team is available to be there.
Yes.
And they can watch it happen and know what to expect with some of these movements. Not only does that help inform your shot list and your storyboard, but it
Yeah.
also means that your DP is going to be able to say something like, oh, yeah, if there's a wall right there, I can't film them that close to me.
Yes.
And start to point out some problems you can catch before you're on set.
Yeah, which when you're just starting out and not knowing the different, lens widths and framing, it's going to be tricky. Sometimes you'll assume that something is going to be easy to get filmed on set, but maybe the space is really small. And that's one of the first things that we ran into when we were starting to film a lot. My brother and I, it was getting into these spaces, and you always think, well, it's bigger in my head than it actually is in real life.
It always is. That's unfortunate.
And if you're not an accomplished cinematographer, it's going to be difficult for you to just get in that space and think, oh, okay, well, I can just throw an 18 on.
Yep.
And then, well, this is way too fish-eyed. This looks really weird in here with these two people sitting next to each other in this table with a wall that's 6 feet away.
For some reason, it gives an eerie, very 90s vibe to this film I wasn't planning for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I was on a set recently that did the complete opposite, which was really nice. It was director Amanda Woods, who's been on the podcast before.
Perfect.
And she was directing this one.
Okay.
And she had us rehearsing in her living room and kept us, she was like, nope, we can't move too much of the furniture or anything. I want you all to be very used to all the obstacles that are here because the space that we're shooting in is very, very small.
Yeah.
And warned us right up front that especially when we had a bunch of stunts happening in this small space with about 8 or 9 people in a tiny space, all fighting and jumping over each other, we had to rehearse within those constraints too. So then by the time we actually got to the filming location, I walked in, I was expecting a closet.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, actually, no, there's plenty of space in here for us to all move, which was the opposite of what usually happens. So it was really nice that the director had time to tour the location with the DP, take a bunch of photos, and set up expectations appropriately for us during the rehearsal process.
That's really solid.
It was really nice.
I was in sales for years, and the one line that I held on to that helped me keep customers long term was Underpromise and Overdeliver.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of times on indie film sets, there's a lot of overpromising, and it's very genuine, right?
Yeah.
Everybody thinks that their movie is going to be the next insert name of
Clerks.
famous indie film. Yeah, Clerks, or I'm the next Richard Linklater, whatever the case may be. You don't go out doing it if you don't think that you have a shot at your film becoming famous. But the reality is that 99% of the films that are made on the indie film scene really just get screened at a couple film festivals and mostly to friends and family.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of the situation.
Which is not a bad thing and can be leveraged for other stuff down the road. And at the end of the day, it's also a movie you made and you put your art into the world. So
Yeah.
if you're not bringing in several $1 billion for your $5,000 short film, please don't think that that's a failure of that short film.
No,
It's
for
not.
sure. And everything moves in steps anyway. But that's really cool that Amanda did that on your set. Like just basically prepping you for these difficult movements in a set that's actually going to be smaller than when you're going to be filming it.
It was perfect.
Because it's better to do that
Yeah.
than be crammed when you're shooting and you didn't rehearse on that.
Exactly. Especially for fight stunts where it's a safety concern and a safety issue.
Do we want to talk about some excuses for skipping rehearsals that we've heard or we imagine we might hear someday, and we have an answer written down so that we can have a witty retort ready when we hear them?
I really do. But
Okay.
I do want to mention one thing first as far as the difficult camera movements as a part of rehearsal goes.
Okay.
I need to remember the name of this app, and I want to say Magic Cinema Lens.
Oh, yeah. Yes, if you
Something like that.
There's free camera apps they're different for Android and for iOS, but they do make apps that are free and some of them are paid, but you can basically put in the model of camera that you have and then the lens
that you're
millimeter
going to be shooting with.
and it'll just preview that shot for you right on your phone.
And it's so practical. And you
Yeah.
can just take a quick screenshot and then your storyboard is done. And obviously, these apps are not a sponsor because I can't remember the name of them. So
Yes.
even if they were a sponsor, they aren't anymore.
Just
Congratulations.
Yes. Just check it out if you're trying to get something done quickly, because sometimes if you get in the space, you don't want to take your Cinelens collection and your Blackmagic or whatever other camera
it's just
equipment that
a
you
lot
have.
of gear to haul around.
Yeah, and then there's ways. I used to do math a lot of times because I have a small micro four thirds setup, and it's like, well, this is an APS-C sensor that we're going to be shooting on, and it's like, well, I just divide it by 1.5 or whatever, and then I can adjust my millimeter, which it doesn't quite work very
It's not
solidly.
100%, but it is impressive that you know the math and the ratios and the correlation to all that.
Well,
because
full frame to APS-C to micro four thirds is all like tricky math if you're trying to bounce between all three of them. But it's easier just to get the app.
And I went into camera because I thought I wouldn't have to do math.
No,
Here we are.
You always have to do math.
Math is everywhere. Dang it, my math teacher was right.
Yes, and like crazy cinematographers and DPs, they can actually eyeball distances within an inch because they're so used to
I
pulling
have
focus.
seen people do that,
Yeah.
and it is the coolest thing. If you ever get a chance to be on a set with some of those, like the tough gaffer bros, I guess is hopefully not the offensive way to say that, but that's kind of how I refer to them. They're usually in a band tee of some kind that's from some big tour, and they've got all the stories, and they're just going to walk right up, set this exact focus length because they know exactly how far away the talent is, and just
12 feet 3 inches. There it is.
Yeah, I'm like, how on earth? I'm
Nailed
also
it.
a woman, so I've been lied to about what 6 inches is my whole life. So I don't know how they do this.
Depth
Anyway,
perception issues.
it's tough,
Should we talk
Okay, yes.
about excuses for skipping rehearsals? So, sometimes you hear things like, larger productions often skip rehearsals. I'm just preparing for the big leagues, right?
Yeah.
But can you afford the time on set to wait until the 10th take to get the shot?
No.
Because those bigger productions, obviously, they have budget.
They do.
And maybe they do skip rehearsals, or maybe they do rehearsal on set that day because they booked the location for 3 days because they have the extra money.
They could do that. Actually, that kind of leads us to the next one.
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg doesn't rehearse because he worries about rehearsals ruining the moment.
Where actually he just avoids rehearsals to the point of predictability.
Yes.
I had to look that up because I had seen the quote about Steven Spielberg not rehearsing.
Yeah, I guess it's been misinterpreted to that a lot. He actually does do rehearsals. He does prefer to do like detailed walkthroughs and blocking and all that.
Yeah.
Apparently on set.
Yes.
He does prefer that, but that means that it gets budgeted into the shoot day schedule.
For sure. And also, Steven Spielberg works with very well-trained actors.
Also true. He's
Yeah.
not picking up who he could find on Craigslist.
The thing that I worry about with low-budget indie film sets is that some actors are absolutely incredible. Some actors are still developing.
Yeah.
And the fear that I have on set more than ruining spontaneity is that feeling of somebody searching for their lines. And I've talked to other actors about this too, that when they go on set, and you can see sometimes actors grabbing the lines out of their brains.
Yeah.
And to me, it always plays out on camera. And that is a worse outcome than somebody that comes off as overly rehearsed to me.
And there is a difference in it feeling like these words didn't just pop into their head all of a sudden, right? Because that is a careful line that actors have to toe is they also can't look like they knew what they were going to say.
True.
So
True.
there's a fine balance there, and it's really hard, which is why you should try to get actors when you can and not just random
Use your friends.
Yeah, if possible. If possible. Unless your friends are great actors, then that's just a win-win.
Yeah.
But I will say I knew one actor who was so good at memorizing lines, but it was the funniest thing. And I don't believe they ever did much stage or film work. I think they mostly did stage.
Yeah.
And they would rehearse with their script in hand, and they would like sort of just read it out loud to themselves over and over and over again, which is good and a great way to memorize things. But then sometimes during longer monologues, you could see this actor's eyes going left to like they were still reading across the page.
Wow. Like photographic memory.
And I was like,
It's like they can see the picture of the script in their minds and they're just reading it.
And that was kind of wild. I'd never experienced anything.
Maybe it was a robot from the future.
That was it. AI has been here longer than we expected.
Yeah, and then they went down the same societal path that we did. Where it's like they just want to be famous AI. Everybody spends all the marketing doesn't go to like products that help people. It just goes to attention seeking. And speaking of which, if you like this podcast, you should probably subscribe to it.
That's a great time to throw that in there.
Yes.
Don't forget to subscribe or follow this podcast on
whatever platform that you're on. We would really appreciate it. And if you do like it, tell a friend. So
next famous excuse for skipping rehearsals.
We'll rehearse on set because we apparently didn't actually need all that time for filming. I'm sure every shot will be a one-take wonder. The script is simple. It doesn't need rehearsal. Then perhaps let's see our first episode about boring stories.
Delightful.
Yeah. So there's a lot of times we'll have excuses. We can do it on set, which I will say we've done that before. We did do a rehearsal on set for our last film.
Oh, we did. Absolutely. Yeah. But we put that in the schedule.
Yes, for sure.
We knew we weren't going to have time to rehearse with everybody beforehand. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we made sure that we gave, an hour for the first shot, another 45 minutes for a more complicated one.
Yeah.
Like there were...
We did block it off, which it's, it's not ideal sometimes, but when you're adults in the working world and work-life balance is trickier and trickier every single year, sometimes you can't get everybody together except for the shoot. But we're going to talk about some other things that we've done there. Do you have another example of a excuse?
I do. This one's my favorite is we'll fix it in post.
Yes. By
chopping together the moments where they did get the lines right.
Oh, yes. Unless you are an amazing editor, I've never seen that done well.
And don't get me wrong, an editor, I do believe, can make or break a performance.
For sure.
Depending on which takes they do pick.
Yes.
There's a lot of validity to that, so never make your editors angry.
Yeah. But they can't pull something out of thin air.
No, they can't. Like if the connection and the emotion in the moment wasn't there, yeah.
You need to have a good performance for them to tackle in the first place.
Yeah.
My actors aren't being paid. I don't want to overwork them, which actually is a valid reason. You don't want to waste their time.
Yeah.
However, maybe you should talk to the actors first about that because they might want the rehearsal time, especially if this is one of their first film projects, or they're trying to break into film and they need to have a good film reel, and you're one of the first things that they're going to be using on that. Maybe they do need the rehearsal because it would be a bigger waste for them to come on set, spend an entire day, and then not have anything usable in the future for them.
And keep in mind, if they don't have anything usable for their reel, how do you think your film's going to look?
Yes. That might be a rough one.
Okay, the last one is my favorite.
Yeah.
This one, because I've heard this one from quite a few people, actually. We don't need rehearsals. They're rehearsing on their own.
No, they're not.
No. In no world are they doing that. They are hopefully, probably, definitely running their lines and doing some character work.
Yes.
Yes. But they are not rehearsing on their own. And you know what? If they tell you that they are, they're actors. They're liars, and they're good at it.
Don't trust the word of an actor.
Well, I guess maybe just the word of an actor. They're also known for being vulnerable and genuine, too, I guess.
Oh, I suppose.
Whatever.
Yin and yang. There's the good and the bad. All right. Well, yeah. So obviously rehearsals are important. Do you want to talk about a cheap trick for the week?
I would love to talk about a cheap trick because I think it's a really important one, and it's a very accessible cheap trick for everyone and very applicable to rehearsals.
Well, you're leaving me on a cliffhanger here. What is this cheap trick?
I rehearsed this pitch, so that's how it's so good. No, I'm kidding.
I'm on the edge of my seat, literally.
That's just because of the chairs, I think.
Yeah,
anyway, okay. The cheap trick is to lean into remote and virtual meetings and rehearsals whenever possible.
For sure. And that's cheap in the sense of saving time. More so than saving money, or maybe you can't afford to do anything in person.
And if you don't have a location, or you're flying people in from out of town or whatever.
Yes. It's still okay to do your rehearsals or your meetings virtually And sometimes it feels like a waste of time when everybody gets together and it's poorly organized. Because I've seen rehearsals that go that way too, where it's like, why did I spend 30 minutes driving here and then another 3 hours here and then 30 minutes driving back when you only needed me for 45 minutes?
Tops.
It can be pretty rough.
It can be a little bit rough. But
We actually did the pre-production meeting for Lawful Evil, which is our most recent short film that we shot.
Which, if you listened to a previous episode and heard us call it Chaotic Evil, yes, the title did end up changing.
We changed it.
How about that in like the last 8 hours before submitting it?
There were too many chaotic evils.
Yes.
We looked up Chaotic Evil film. There's a lot of films called Chaotic Evil, but we had a backup name in case.
Obviously, very different name,
Yes,
for sure.
and we used it.
But
Yes. So we did that pre-production meeting via email.
yeah.
That was totally asynchronous.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I just kind of want to talk about a little bit too is rehearsals definitely are necessary. Yeah. However, sometimes if you've worked with the same people many times over, they're not as crucial. Or spending the amount of time on that isn't as crucial. You can identify problems before they happen. Like, this is a unique shot. This is some unique blocking.
Yeah.
And then maybe just pull in the key players.
Yeah.
And then another thing I want to share about rehearsals too is sometimes the actual product itself can be a rehearsal. Like, the film can be a rehearsal. If you have a hard time finding people to work with and coordinating schedules, maybe you as an aspiring director and cinematographer throw a couple labs on a couple actors, get them to act out a scene that you've written and see how it goes.
And just make your rehearsal actually get captured so that you, A, can watch your own growth, because there's nothing harder than looking back at some of your older work.
For
and
sure.
Seeing
how rough it is.
It is. I feel that way when I go back to some of the older episodes of this podcast,
Hey.
for sure. Anyway.
But it's out there.
But it's there. It's on the internet forever. It's
hidden
great.
in the open.
It's there. But then also it gives you that experience of trying to coordinate all the schedules, of figuring out what a call sheet looks like, of understanding, making sure that every time you send an email to people, you always include the line, please confirm receipt of this email. Because I can't tell you how many times as an AD or just support on set, I have forgotten to include that and nobody replies.
Yeah.
When you send out the call sheets and you don't know if everybody got it or not. And that's a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Yeah. And yes, you want to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Yes.
So it is important, but we were able to do that on ours, to just send out an email for a pre-production meeting because we knew everybody.
And we really didn't want to bog people down with a long meeting when I could just as easily send out an overly wordy, novel-length email as I am wont to do.
Yeah, yeah. And then with a TLDR, too long didn't read, attached.
I did put at the very beginning of TLDR,
just in case
nobody was going to read the rest of it. But I also put in multiple notes for this. After reading this email, this is what I need from you. To confirm that they saw the part about the costumes. They saw the part about the location. They saw the part about the time. So there were fail safes built into the email, but it was an email. Maybe not ideal, but also didn't waste anybody's time.
Yeah. It's a balance. It's a balance. But I am serious about if anybody out there is an aspiring filmmaker. Go out, do the thing. Don't let the rehearsal thing stop you too much, because it's going to be hard on your very first film to really break through anyway, because you're going to run into a whole bunch of issues that you didn't know. Yeah. And so it's better to just go out and do it. And we actually have a friend of ours, Colin Inslee, that there was one film that he did really well with in the film festival circuit, but he was working with an actor that he knew.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was just improv on the day. He set an outline of story beats.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was with an actor that he had worked with many times before. He knew exactly where he was shooting, the environment that he was shooting. He knew, how to nail.
Filmed there before.
Exactly. He knew what the lighting scenario in that location.
Yeah.
And it was this is just going to be an improv. You're going to go through these story beats. We're going to get it, and then we'll see what happens. So it's, kind of like a rehearsal in practicing your filmmaking skills.
Yeah.
But at the same time, then just taking that, and if it's good, you use it.
And you go for it. And if
And
not,
and
it
if
was
it's-
a really good rehearsal.
Yeah, exactly.
And good rehearsals are worth feeling proud of.
Yeah, and you can bring those same people onto another set again in the future because, you already have that experience with them.
You know you can do it.
So do you want to talk about Christopher Nolan's Following, his first feature film that he shot for $6,000? Because that is what a lot of people that want to make indie films want to hear about, is how cheap they can make a movie, even though it takes countless hundreds of hours to get it across the finish line.
So much more than that. And so much. If you did a film for under like $25,000, that means you got a lot of generous offers from like food and catering and people and locations and costumes and things. Like, not that I'm saying low budget filmmaking is bad. Low budget filmmaking is, I'm hopeful, the next big wave in cinema. That is my theory. But hopefully not so low that nobody gets paid enough to eat.
But people are working on it, and for me it was no film school, right? I didn't go to film school, so I got my experience by volunteering on set.
Yeah,
and that's a good way to do it.
A really valuable thing to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me more about Christopher Nolan, because it was a 6-month rehearsal process for this film?
He, for his first feature film, basically Following was first and second takes. They shot it on film, so it was very limited. Limited budget on the film stock.
Yeah, it was very cost prohibitive to do more than 3 takes.
Yes, for sure. And then limited access to the locations that they had scouted.
Yeah.
And if you've watched the movie, it's non-chronological, which is kind of cool too, because obviously he went on to do Memento, which was famously not chronological. But this one, it was actually functional too, that it was non-chronological, because when you know you're going to edit that way, you don't have to worry as much about continuity errors when you're not shooting sequentially.
That's kind of
essentially
nice.
So you can bounce around to different locations, get the shots you need when you can get them. But yeah, the actors rehearsed for 6 months because they had to get in and out of the location so quickly once they were able to shoot it. And he actually shot it in black and white because he said it was easier to look interesting.
Without having to do a detailed color grade and all this.
Yeah.
Especially on film, which was like dyes and tints and intense stuff.
For sure. And also, you can make a dynamic lighting scene and then not have to worry quite as much about the props that are in that location, because it's just the reflectability and not the actual color information that's there.
It's not the whole color scheme of the room. It's just, did all these things exist in this time period? Beautiful. Then we're fine. As long as you don't have too many mirrors.
Yeah, that's
or
tricky.
Or foil.
Yeah. The reflective surfaces you want to watch out for. I want to shoot a scene in a house of mirrors. That would be a good one. That would be a challenging one.
That would be a very challenging one. I don't know if I could. I've shot some very interesting shots with a lot of mirrors because you can get a lot of fun angles and things. But I don't know, a whole house of mirrors. That one would be tough.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to attempt that.
I would just go right into it with no rehearsals and a camera and bring my actors in and just assume I'll figure it out on the set.
Just on the fly.
Wait, what were we talking about in this episode?
On that note, rehearsals, at the end of the day, especially in indie films and low budget filmmaking, rehearsals are a luxury.
Yeah, they're always a luxury. Even if you're paying people, you're going to have to pay them for the rehearsals.
Yeah.
Too. So, but it's a balance.
It is. It's important to do. It's important to be respectful of people's time, but it is, especially for safety for certain things.
Yes.
I would say if you have any stunts whatsoever, rehearsal instantly becomes a non-negotiable.
For sure.
It just does.
You got to make sure that you practice that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you want better performances out of people, you're going to want to rehearse with them if you're doing something that's very heavy on the acting side.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that the actor has a correct motivation in mind and that the actors are playing off of each other. Like, just doing it a few times a day ahead of time, even if it's virtually, you're going to be a lot happier than if you just have them meet for 5 minutes on set and then go from there.
No, we're long lost best friends.
Yeah.
And we have this secret language we've built between us since we were friends since we were 2.
Yeah. And there's also another reason why things can get a little clicky in developing film scenes or in even larger film scenes, is that you end up working with the same people all the time because of efficiency.
And you trust them, you know them, and you know what they're capable of. And especially if they're people that are they get your vibe, they get your sense of humor. Everyone works really cohesively on set. They're all very easygoing. It can be really easy to get those little like cliques and groups and companies and things.
For sure. But it is good to bring new people on once you get one established.
Everyone needs fresh meat sometimes.
Yes, they do.
Says the vegetarian.
Fresh meat. I think it's just a saying. Should we talk about our Filmmaker of the Week?
Absolutely. Because I'm really excited about this one. So it's Gregory Pellerito. I think is the shining example of finding a silver lining. When a baseball career ended abruptly due to an injury and a shift to film, thanks to inspiration from Tim Burton and Big Fish, which I also love, led him to lean into his first love, writing, he opted to follow a college professor's advice and make a film in lieu of grad school. And that short film was a hit. Fast forward a few years, and Gregory is now in distribution for his feature Moments of Youth with some names you probably recognize, like Sherry O'Terry and John Farley, who is, yes, the youngest Farley brother. But despite its successes, this film was not without its own level of chaos.
From nearly 600 on-set COVID tests, all negative, thankfully, to actors no-showing, to a location shutting down their allotted shooting time to 4 hours from the permitted 16 hours, Gregory was able to think on his feet, pivot creatively and collaboratively solve these issues and more issues as they popped up. Gregory says, I actually enjoy the process of when something falls through and I have to think on my feet and pivot in the moment. It's one of my greatest strengths as a director. Getting the film made is the difficult part. Making the film under whatever circumstances is not. It's always a blast. So make sure you check out Moments of Youth on Amazon, and we'll put a link to that in our show notes. And great mindset, Gregory. That's awesome.
I love that.
You're always, when you're on set, it's just a matter of getting through the motions. It's going to get done. You're going to figure it out.
You will always figure it out. It will always get done. And I think that's been the most inspiring thing from having this featured Filmmaker of the Week segment as a whole.
Yes.
Is that so many people are showing all the ways they've overcome things.
Yeah.
And I don't know, having 16 hours to film in a school, then suddenly showing up to that school and being told, no, never mind, you've got to be out of here in 4.
That's insane.
That's wild. And they did it anyway. And that's so cool. And they had to piecemeal some things with like some parking lot shots. And I think he said they ended up with like 3 schools hodgepodge together to look like one. But they made it work.
If you know your shot list and your script in and out, though, you can think on your feet and cut in the moment if you need to.
That does help.
It's like, okay, well, how do we still convey the most important information here? We gotta
Yes.
We're losing a quarter of or 3/4 of it. So what 3/4 can we lose here and still keep the story alive and keep the film alive? That's pretty cool.
It's awesome.
If you want to submit to Filmmaker of the Week, go to indiefilmpodcast.com/submit. You'll find a link there. We also do film reviews, video film reviews, written film reviews. You can find all that information on that website as well.
And I think the last thing I really want to emphasize is just rehearse. Please rehearse.
Yes.
Please rehearse.
Just like we rehearsed this ending right now.
So well. This is why we do a succinct farewell.
Yes, we do. Well, shall we succinctly say goodbye?
I think so.
Bye.
Bye.